Today we're going to revisit a quick subject, and it's a subject of how evil is too evil. Hello everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire, and today's quick tip for DMs definitely is going to get a little bit heavier as we are revisiting the subject of how evil is too evil, just largely because of some interactions I've had in the last month and a half-ish or so. It's just brought things back to the forefront of my mind, but there is a caveat that comes with it. If everything that you're about to depict, describe, or plan to include in your story, in regards to villains, their various heinous acts, the awful, horrible ways truly corrupt, debased, debauched, and vile individuals can inflict themselves on an unwilling populace, people, or even just individuals, if everybody's on board with that and has been forewarned and forearmed, then hey, alright. It's your story, it's your game. The only way to really play it wrong is if nobody's having fun. But I'm approaching this from the standpoint of somebody is a little bit too uncomfortable. Maybe not enough to always say anything, or maybe they're new and they don't want to say anything or disrupt things or rock the boat too much. Then, this is coming from that standpoint, from that mindset. Again, if everybody's all clear and on board, fantastic, great. But it's for those instances where somebody is not on board. But before we get into all of that, if you're new here to the channel, go on down there, hit that subscribe button, and become a regular member for the Gamer's Den. Or if you've already gone on ahead and listed yourself on such an incredible roster of legendary heroes, then go on down to hit the subscribe button and share the video far and wide. God, my brain stopped there for a second. Anyways, let's get back into this now and just get to the subject at hand. It's a tricky thing. It's a difficult thing. So it starts off with knowing where your own personal moral line is. I know I have one, and I still come around and play with it once in a while. Mostly if it fits the story, if the story demands it in a certain way. And even then, more often than not, as I've gotten older, wiser, more experienced, I've learned that it's better to allude to some of these things, to make implications, to allow the players to conjure up the horrors in their own mind, rather than just out and out describing some of the awful things that could be happening. And again, sometimes narratively it just makes sense. If you're in Warhammer Fantasy and you're going up a cult of Slaneshi worshippers, then yeah, that kind of depravity, that debauchery, that descent into seeking ever more vile, sadistic, or thrilling pleasures is what's going to happen. Or if you're going up against Grozd, or any devils that are using their different abilities to generate vices and moral decay through those means in order to corrupt and subsume souls and local legal structures under their thumbs, then, again, that makes sense. That is narratively earned and can be narratively earned as the players progress through a campaign, slowly unraveling things and seeing how deep the corruption goes. How deeply do the roots and tendrils of this evil spread themselves throughout society, and how awful does it really get the deeper into the dark that they go? That can be a way of narratively earning some of these more awful things, but again, sometimes it is still just better to allude to things, because while presumably you and your friends are already all on board with whatever's going to happen in the campaign, everybody's been forewarned to a certain extent, forearmed without diving into spoilers for what's to come, then hey, fantastic, everybody should be on board with it. But I am approaching this from the standpoint of a new person at the table, or somebody who's pretty uncomfortable but doesn't know how to approach it, or somebody does just flat out say at some point, either during a break or after the session, hey, I didn't really enjoy that part. That got really uncomfortable for me. There's nothing wrong with taking a moment to step back and re-examine the story, as some of these interactions I've had DMs saying, well, villains should be villainous, they should be doing awful, evil things, and they should should be something that the players want to stop. They're heroes after all. And I agree with you. I do agree with that sentiment, that standpoint, but not at the expense of sacrificing somebody's sense of fun at the table. If somebody's just so uncomfortable that they don't really want to come back, or that they're not enjoying the adventure and slogging through it, that can have a palpable effect on the rest of the game, even if they're not trying to derail things. They just are going to be less enthused and less into it, and that can start to drag the rest of the party down. And it's not really their fault. The only thing that is their fault is either not saying anything, or it's the DM's fault for not noticing or for not taking into consideration how this person feels. And not only that, but assumedly this person is your friend, or at least is somebody you meet with regularly for gaming. And goddamn, what a shame to just ruin the experience for someone because you couldn't let go of your vision, or couldn't just re-examine it and maybe edit it and scale it back just a little bit. Like I said before, you can allude to all kinds of awful things. When I started describing corruption, debasedness, going down deeper into the darkness to just see how awful things can get, many of you probably already had your imagination start firing on all cylinders and conjuring up all of manner of grotesque imageries in your own mind's eye. And certainly in many ways that can be far more effective to individually unnerve players, or at least get them thinking, oh no, this is something we've got to stop, than if you were to just go out and describe something in detail. Again, caveat in there that if everybody's already on board with everything, then hey, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, maybe just a moment's worth of consideration. But for those players who may end up uncomfortable for some reason, it's again worth it to just step back and make sure. I try to check with everybody after every session. How did you enjoy it? Did you like how this went? And granted, these are people who are my friends and have been my friends in some instances since high school or even grade school, and they will tell me if they didn't enjoy something, but I still ask. I still make a point of asking, because even if I didn't make somebody uncomfortable, if they're just getting kind of bored, then that lets me know that, hey, maybe I should change things up or speed things along. It might come at the expense of what I had envisioned, but I'm not the only one at the table in telling a story. I'm not the only one at the table looking to have fun. I want my friends to enjoy the story. I want the people I run games for to become entranced, enthralled, enthused, and diving right into the thick of things, to get themselves just hooked onto it and wanting to game more and more, to come back to the table with all kinds of ideas, either for the session at hand or for the characters that they have coming down the line. And what a shame it would be that I put them off because I didn't want to compromise on the awful things I had envisioned that their players would encounter. And I know for myself, I've scaled back on some things. Some things just hit a little too close to home for me, for my wife, and it's just not worth going into for my own personal trauma, and I don't know what other kinds of personal trauma my friends may be dealing with. They are my friends, but we don't always fully, wholly, and totally know the people we have spent our lives around. Sometimes some people just don't want to share things and leave things buried where they are. Sometimes some people, that's just the best way for them to cope. They're not ready to talk about something. And going into subjects that could trigger on that, it's just not worth it. I want my friends to have a good time at my table. Anyways, this was supposed to be a quick tips for DMs. We are nearing the 9-minute mark, so we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here. This certainly was a heavy enough episode, I think. I should have more lighthearted fare next week, but go on down to the comments below, let me know your thoughts, hit those like or dislike buttons, and remember, if you're new here to the channel, go on down there, hit the subscribe button, and become a regular member here at the Gamer's Den. Or if you've already gone on ahead and done that, then go ahead, hit those like buttons and share the video far and wide. But with all that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Thank you all so very much for your time, and you all absolutely have yourselves a good night.